Hello, welcome to my second live stream. Today I'm joined by Yunus Hermann, an old acquaintance, friend of mine, and you might know him on my channel. He's the person who premiered and recorded my piano suite that's sort of loosely based off of Japanese harmonies and whatnot. So I think I might have told you that at the time, but I kept it sort of to myself. But I think I like to ask if, usually at the beginning, if we're good on sound, but I don't see anybody complaining. We've got a few people watching. So I'm going to just sort of preface this by saying this is sort of like my first official stream. What's going to happen going forward is I'm going to have people on that know a lot about something I know very little to nothing about. So I can ask super naive, maybe to some people idiotic or obvious questions, because not everybody knows everything about everything. And I think it's good that I don't know if people know like the Gradus ad Parnassum, the book by Fuchs about counterpoint. It's written like a dialogue between a master and a student, and the student's always asking questions about, how do I do this in counterpoint, and the master explains, and then I think that's a good sort of setup, or think about that sort of as these videos. I'm sort of the pupil here, and today Yunus is going to be our teacher, telling us about Scriabin, who he knows tons of stuff about. And I would like to encourage anybody who's watching to ask questions in the comments, and Yunus will be the one to answer them, because I don't know very much about Scriabin, and I'm very curious. So I think we could just get into it. I think my first question to you sort of is, who is Scriabin? Why do you think he's important? And what time period is Scriabin as far as a composer? So can we put him as a romantic composer or modern, or that might be too many questions in one, but...
First of all, I want to say that I'm very glad to be here with you and to be talking about this subject matter that is very close to my heart. And Scriabin is a very influential composer, Russian composer that lived during the turn of the century. He was classmates with Rachmaninoff at the conservatory. So they lived at the same time, but he sadly met a very untimely end. So he didn't have to endure the hardness of the 20th century, like Rachmaninoff, who had to emigrate to America. So he just, succumbed to a very unfortunate illness. But so he lived at that time, at that very musically speaking, historic, important time, because it was the turn between the late Romanticism and numerous different ways into modernity, which he also followed his own path into a very modern style of writing and rethinking music, in a sense. Yes, and also the importance of music. Yeah.
Do we know much about like his education? What decade of the 19th century was he born? Like 1880s?
So he was born in 1872. Yes.
Okay.
So, and he is mostly known to pianists. So there's probably no pianist that doesn't know Scriabin, because he mainly composed piano music. And then in the later stages of his life, he also had some big orchestral symphonic works. But pianists are typically the ones that are crazy about Scriabin, because he's really focused, very much like Rachmaninoff, on this part of the repertoire.
Okay, we've got the first comment, and this is an interesting thing about. I think Scriabin is not has the universal appeal as, say. I'll just put the comment on screen. I can't seem to like Scriabin no matter how much I try, and I think this is essentially one of the issues a lot of people have with Scriabin. I think it's probably one of the issues I had getting into Scriabin, is probably because I think, my opinion, you can obviously elaborate, is that it doesn't have the same sort of like motivic or melodic driven characteristic that, say, Rachmaninoff does, in a way. Does that make sense to you, or is that a mean thing to say?
It's not a mean thing to say. It's a bit
or
hard
ill-informed,
because it's in general it's a bit difficult to criticize or speak about Scriabin, because he has very distinct three periods of composition, where he wrote very, very different music. So it's very easy to distinguish the early, the middle, and the late period, because of very, very different approaches to writing and to using tonality. And but I would say that I'm not quite sure what you mean, because especially in the late pieces, but actually throughout, the motivic importance is very important in his writing, because he very much uses the leitmotif technique, where he
I
has
noticed
actually
that.
a set
Yeah.
of musical ideas that he reuses all the time. But I think what can be very exhausting, maybe especially in the later Scriabin, is that it is all laden with a lot of tension, a lot of tension, and it's just very, very heavy in this sense. It's not really not a relaxation, no, kind of music. and,
No,
and
but and I would say it's sort of if you like listen to the wrong piece, because I've spent the last week sort of preparing for the stream. I've obviously seen Yunus before play Scriabin many times, and live, which sort of, it didn't get me like full on interested in Scriabin, but I was able to appreciate it in a way I hadn't before. So it could be that if you listen to one or two pieces, then you sort of discount it, or if you aren't attentively listening to it, then maybe you think it's not interesting. But what I noticed this week is it's actually it's worth listening to a few times a piece, and I think it doesn't. I don't know if there's pieces like that have like the sort of like instant melodies like Tchaikovsky or Mozart that people can instantly just sort of, oh, I immediately know that. And I think that's more what I meant. It's sort of like ethereal in a lot of ways. And this is just my sort of like basic surface level understanding of what I heard. I haven't analyzed the music at all. I haven't gone very deep into it.
Yes. So this melodic aspect, I can get behind that, because he thinks about music very physical, like the movements of melodies are much more important than their form of melodic melodic divisions, and to have it in some kind of song like also like Rachmaninoff, when he have da 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 di 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 dim, he uses this Russian folklore music a lot, and Tchaikovsky also. That's the general sense of Russian music, that they have a very strong connection to the Russian folklore. And in this sense, Scriabin is lacking this kind of Russian
That's
music.
something I want to ask you about.
Using that so much than other composers. In this case, he's also viewed maybe by Russian theoreticians more as a Western kind of musician, and but nonetheless, especially in his early works, there are a lot of also melodic, highly melodic pieces. Yeah, maybe we will maybe listen to some of them later on. Yes,
performed by Yunus. So no, I was noticing that this week. I was listening to it, and it was like, well, I read a little bit about him, not a great deal. Just that he was. I got that he was educated in Russia, and I think had the same teacher. I think as Rachmaninoff.
Yes. So he was. Yeah. He studied at the Moscow Conservatory with Rachmaninoff, and he had the same composition teacher, Arensky, but also the same piano teacher, which his name is Svierev. It was not at the conservatory, it was like pre-college. He was a very influential piano teacher who had all the young talents staying at his house and teaching them the whole day. And all there, they were classmates with Rachmaninoff. But already at the conservatory, for example, he wasn't able to finish with a gold medal in composition, because he had a very big conflict with Arensky, who was a big fan of Rachmaninoff, but he didn't think that Scriabin had what it takes
to be okay.
Yeah. And then so there was this conflict also already.
And I'd say what my sort of like superficial, just sort of instant thing I noticed when listening to a lot of his pieces, like I put on his orchestral works sort of on, there's a playlist on YouTube, and I just had them going in the background today while shaving and stuff like that, just so I had it going in the background. And I just kept thinking, there's a lot of this that sounds more French to me than Russian, or like a mix between sort of like French Impressionism, almost like Saint-Saëns sometimes, even though Saint-Saëns not quite impressionist as a composer, or like Debussy La Mer type feeling. Like there's a piece Reverie that I found very pretty, but that reminded me more like if sort of aspects of late Romanticism and all of its different forms, like the chromaticism of Wagner and sort of the ethereal nature of French Impressionism sort of met together somewhere in the middle. And I was searching for where's like the Russian. That's what I was looking for. So did he spend a lot of time in France at all?
He did actually. He didn't spend any significant amount of time in France. He spent a lot of time in Switzerland, but that was mostly the German-speaking part of Switzerland also. But I would say that to get into his work, I think the orchestral works are probably the most difficult and at least inviting pieces to get to know this composer, because they are already very, very advanced in his development in a sense. And I think especially the preludes, Opus 11 and after those after Opus 11 are very much more accessible. That's what I would say. And etudes, yes. And the early sonata, especially the second sonata, he wrote 10 sonatas, yeah. And also in the sonatas you have early, middle, and late ones. And in general, the early works are the most easiest because they sound like Chopin a bit. Yeah, they inhabit the same musical world a bit than Chopin, and he decisively exits this world in his late state.
That's before we started the stream. We were briefly talking about how I had recognized like a few not quite melodic but more like rhythmic similarities between Chopin and Scriabin, because I think we both agree that tonally and harmonically speaking it's a completely different world, but as far as a lot of the rhythmic characteristics, I found there were some similarities between certain pieces. Now I'm forgetting the opus numbers, but there was a prelude that sort of reminded me rhythmically but not motivically of the theme of the main theme of the first movement, the second Chopin sonata. That's sort of just the rhythmic. It's not important. It's just I noticed some similarities rhythmically.
No, I mean it's not possible to overstate the importance and influence that Chopin had on any composer that focused on piano music at that time. So it was just like that he kind of reinvented the way to write for the piano, and in this case there are a lot of similarities, definitely. Yeah, and also in the way of having a very the rhythmic similarities, I think they stem from being very sung, very melodically, very cantabile.
Bel canto.
Bel canto influences.
Yeah.
And those were kind of in the musical genes of early Scriabin. Yeah.
Okay. I think the do we know much about his sort of so what are his three periods, and how do we distinguish them from one another? Because you said there are three periods of Scriabin's works that are different, and what do you think, if you could like say for each period, what was the sort of driving force behind each period? What was the, like, not driving force, what would be the right way to say this? What do you think what is like representative of that era in his compositions? What is he trying to say as a composer, or what are his influences? How could you describe it, like wrap it up in a few sentences each era? I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this.
So, I would say that it can be very much appreciated in his philosophical development, actually. That the things that he writes about have been have been changing a lot during his life, and we know a lot of his writings that can document that very well. And with these changes in thought, there comes also a lot of change in music. So in the early times, and the early works would be the preludes, the early preludes and the etudes, which are very have some very famous pieces.
What are the opus numbers for the early preludes?
The early preludes are opus 11, but also 13, 15, 17. It was, and we already see there this very strong connection to Chopin, because what he did, he had kind of a bet with his editor, with his publisher, Belayev, who published all his early works. And he said that Chopin, he wrote 24 preludes, one for each key, and he said, I'm going to do 2 for each. And so there was this 2 years where he wrote 48 preludes, and 24 of them he then condensed into one opus 11, which is just like the opus 28 by Chopin, which has one in each key, and then the other ones there were published in smaller collections just for financial monetary idea. They thought maybe that sells better. So, but in this sense, it's a clear homage. He maybe even like a bit juvenile. He wants to do Chopin 1/over. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
and so this is very telling. And also the etudes. So we can already see also in the choice of forms how he is oriented completely in that way. So he also wrote his first sonata big sonata with 4 movements. And the first 3 sonatas are his early sonatas. They all have multiple movements. But the most beautiful one is probably the second, which is called Sonata Fantasie.
Okay.
Which I would highly recommend for anyone to listen to.
Yeah, unfortunately, because of copyright rules on YouTube, we can't. It's a little
probably
iffy.
One of the most beautiful pieces of this early period. Yeah, the second sonata, and it's quite condensed. Also has only 2 movements. So
like the last Beethoven sonata, sort of.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because then during his sonatas he went very straightforward to a one movement conception of the sonata.
Okay.
Yeah. Also the 4th sonata, which has still 2 movement, is that there are attacca and they have the same thematic material.
Okay.
So,
is it written still in like a strict sonata form, or is it more just called sonata?
No, I would say actually the sonata form is also until the very late pieces you can recognize some exposition, development, and recapitulation aspect of it. In the sense that he was willing to venture out into very confused and very complicated tonal and melodic realms. He kind of relied on the kind of conservative formal aspect of things. So he wasn't really an innovator in the form of things. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So that's the first. Then the middle phase is.
And the middle phase is kind of getting to a new way of harmony. So the harmonic innovation is very important for Scriabin, because in the later stage he dispenses with the minor major minor system, and so the middle period is very telling that in the way that we already kind of see that, but we still have episodes that are very clear, and actually we can just see that he still uses key signatures. For example, in the 4th and 5th sonata, he throughout those pieces he uses the signatures, the key signatures, and makes modulations. And in this case, he still is very on the nose tonal, and from the 6th on, he doesn't use them anymore, and which is, I think, very, very telling. Or maybe
it's just written without a key signature, so sort of like with atonal sort of.
That has a very atonal smell to it. Yeah.
Okay.
And but it's more continuous. But it continues this development. But there is a reason that the middle and the late period is divided into 2, and that is that there's this very for him important piece called Prometheus, which is kind of his 4th symphony, where which is a symphonic poem, I would say, at which point he had a new idea of, he kind of invented a new chord, and in this piece everything is written only using this chord, and in later music then still this compositional aspect is still used, but immediately altered, and he tried to find new ways also, but there's this like tipping point at this very important work, the Prometheus Opus 60.
Mm-hmm. And that's an orchestral work, obviously. Yeah.
That's an orchestral work, yes.
Yeah.
And then his last work, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I listened to today. Which what's the point of this? What the stream's called Scriabin in color. And now the question I have is, because while downloading the sheet music to the piece, I don't know if we're going to get to looking at the sheet music or not. But the first page is obviously this. I'll upload the correct. Hold on.
So what's very innovative with this piece is that he notated a so-called luce part. Luce being a voice that is only emitting sound, only emitting color and light. So he wanted so that's the kind of the legend, to know what is meant by it. But then you can see, maybe do you have also the score of the Prometheus?
Yeah, I can't do two at the same time. So
okay.
Now I don't know. When I opened the score. Now let me open the score, because that's I have to go through a mess of windows here on my desktop. Let me. Oh, there it is. All right. Now you're going to have to tell me where to look on this score.
It's at the top, the luce part. Yeah, but it's very, you wouldn't notice it. It's just a lot of held notes. It's always in two voices, so he always wanted two colors to be represented.
So that's the opening page. So I mean, anybody can get this. This is on IMSLP.
And there you have it. So
right at the top, yeah.
Right at the top, you have the luce, yes. And so you see right now there's a F sharp and an A, yes.
Yeah.
And so he wanted those two colors to be projected into so it would be green and
blue or violet.
Bright violet color, yeah.
Okay, so he keeps the same so enharmonic. It doesn't make it for him. It's just the tone in the pure sense.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. And
very interesting. And how do we? So we have this situation where, let me zoom in. I think this is the 1911 score. I read briefly, just sort of scanned an article you sent me today. Where they mentioned that there was a score in 1913, the Parisian score or something, where he sort of built out this part.
Yes, because
he added much more, like fireworks and stuff.
Yes, we have to remember that was at the beginning of the 20th century, so there were only very limited possibilities to realize these kind of ideas of projecting color into a big hall. It's actually not possible at this time. We sent a photo of the best attempt that he made with a friend. So it was just like some meekly light bulbs.
Hold on. Let me get that. I'm gonna pull that up in a second. Yeah, it's not.
That wouldn't have done the job.
It's not quite as grand as for a huge theater.
Yes.
Was this the? I think the name Mazur was who was the technician he worked with.
I don't have
remember.
It on top of
Okay.
Yeah. This at the Scriabin, and yeah.
So I'm imagining they're all just tinted to a certain color.
Yes. But probably look very much the same. if at
Now
all.
it makes
But
it
so,
it,
mhm.
it makes me wonder because I here's the other thing I wanna sort of bring up in the score, because we have the first of all, let's maybe get to the, I'll just leave this pickup, it's funny for a while. So this brings me to the question of, obviously there's some debate, or maybe not, as to whether he had synesthesia. I can never quite pronounce that word correctly.
Synesthesia.
Yeah, synesthesia. Which is, if some people don't know that word, it's some people who I don't think it's just reserved to music. I mean, I think
No,
people
actually not.
people have
There's
it with numbers and mathematical equations
yes,
I've
yes.
seen. So, or words maybe too. I don't know. Or
I haven't
letters
heard of,
could be. I mean, if it exists for numbers, maybe it exists for letters. Who
but
knows?
but in general, it's a neurological phenomenon
Yeah.
that makes you link certain colors to sound, but also, like you said, some people can smell some numbers, yeah, or maybe, yeah. So you have different senses that are connected in a very mysterious way by the brain. Yes,
And
and there are
so,
some musicians known that reported actually hearing colors. And also today I've met maybe 3 musicians in my life that say actually, yeah, they hear some, they always see some colors when they hear
so are they
no.
seeing it like I it's been about a decade since I read this book, but I think that Oliver Sacks, I think, is the writer. He's the, I don't know if anybody knows the movie Awakenings with Robin Williams. But that movie's about this guy that's a sort of a I don't know what he's titled, but he studied sort of brain disorders and things like that. But I don't want. But he wrote a book about people who had disorders with music, and I think there were a couple of cases in that book about synesthesia. That was obviously this is a terrible way to do a book review because I read it like 12 years ago, but I remember it being fascinating at the time because it wasn't just synesthesia, it was other stuff. It was like people with Alzheimer's who could play entire Bach not sonatas, but like preludes and fugues, and then go back to not knowing, their own, children, that sort of a thing. And, and it was, I think it was somebody in the book, it was like they played the first 3 notes of the Bach piece, and that's what got him into it. But until he didn't hear that or something like that, maybe somebody will correct me. It's been a while since I've read it. But I do think there were a few cases in that. And now I don't remember if it's something that is like an actual visual hallucination or more a feeling of the color, if that makes sense.
I don't know if it does, but we know that,
We know that it exists.
Serious way. That's
yeah.
But
so here comes.
Very clear
Sorry.
that Scriabin did not have synesthesia. So
It's clear.
It's quite clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
In this for this purpose, another word can be used, which is synesthetic, maybe. Yeah. So he was used the different aesthetics and wanted to combine them together to enhance his creation in this case, and so we know that it was very much made up, the whole system, and he tried to theoretize it and to inspire himself. A lot of his thinking, of his theory, is just trying to get into a very creative mood. Yeah. I think it was very telling for me, and maybe you can relate to that as a composer. He once in a letter wrote that, so today I have written quite enough and I feel kind of spent. Obviously I could maybe think of something, but that wouldn't be composing.
No, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, I can maybe think out some new thing, but that's not composing. Yeah, for him,
no.
Composing is like it was like a birthing process. It's something that needed to get out in a very painful process, and then and that just had to be put on paper and put into existence. And it's not something that you maybe now I will do this and this. This is not how he thought about it. And these kind of thoughts about color and about philosophy in general are used by him, I guess, to get into a mood where composition becomes necessary.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask about this what's it called? Luci di tastiera or something. It was I can't,
Yeah, light
or
keyboard, light
Luce
keyboard.
light
Yeah,
keyboard or light organ or whatever.
yeah, or color keyboard.
So we have these. I don't know if this indication is for the entire orchestra here.
Yes, it's
Lento. It's for the whole orchestra. A tempo avec misteri. Okay, good. So that's just that word is
so
pretty.
it's a very,
But I heard
very
that
important.
there were things he added apparently dynamics to the light organ.
Yeah, since he had no possibility to realize it, period, so he had also the possibility to dream of very fantastic effects. So he didn't want to have some simple lights, but he wanted to have more effects to it, like fireworks, maybe flimmering,
Sparks, I read. Yeah.
sparks, and different kinds of visuals than just having the light. Yeah, would be much more realizable now with
LEDs and stuff.
LEDs, or maybe I think even actually animation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you could. I'm sure with MIDI, you could just hook up a MIDI. I mean, because these are all these notes are basically within the same stave. I don't even think you need a full keyboard, do you? It's
Yes,
just
yes.
to get the.
But
It's
that
just
would
all you
not-
need are 12,
but-
basically 12 tones, right?
No. You need basically the 12 tones. Yeah. But in this case, you couldn't have these kind of effects. Yes. You could.
No. I know you could do the
Yes.
light maybe.
You could
but
do
then
the
you-
light. Yes, and it has been done. It has been done. Yeah.
Has it been
But-
done
but-
exactly as it's been written? Because I also read
Well,
in your article that it's been sort of like they take liberties and
Yeah.
don't really do it correctly.
So it has been done, but it was a dream in general. And for me, I think also this the decision or this idea to notate that was also maybe a way to concretize, to allude to his new compositional framework, because this there's always one voice in the luce part that stays for a longer time, but the other one changes constantly, and so it changes always with a change of tonality, with a change of harmony in his new
Okay.
sense. Yeah, so it helps us actually to know where the music shifts from one harmony, from one tonality to another one. And the main idea of this luce part is to help the audience appreciate this
The
shift
harmony,
of
yeah.
mood and shift of maybe subject matter and this progress of the music from one idea to the next idea, and to have a visual component to this very new ways of musical progressions.
So it makes me wonder about this that there's actually like a lot of unrealized potential in this piece, sort of, still. That it still hasn't quite been done yet. It's like we every summer if I don't know if there are a lot of like outdoor summer concert festivals that'll do like Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. Sometimes they'll do it with the cannons, or they'll do it with fireworks instead of the cannons. But you can sort of or I think that started basically with Wellington's Victory, this sort of like extra musical aspect, or do we have examples earlier, but outside of like opera? I mean,
But I mean, it's easy to say outside of opera, because
Yeah.
opera is an integral part of any epoch, and every
Yeah.
musician worth his salt used to write also opera, and so
Yeah.
it's very hard for me to make this distinction between programmatic music and some kind of opposition to that, because opera was always part of the music that has been composed at any time. So there was
Yeah.
always this part of having a deeper meaning to the music. Yes. And also in this case, so the programmatic aspect is very important. Yeah. But so I for me the Prometheus is very it's hard to get into, I think, actually. But and also it has a lot of as you said potential to be still realized, but it's also very hard to have this like logistically because you want to have a very good effect, but it has to be flexible, because as you see, Scriabin is very much he always changes tempo every few bars, and it's
you can't just have you can't have
you cannot have a
light technician do
as
it.
a, no, you have to be, it has to be like an instrument, like a soloist, this kind of installation. So it's very hard. I did something in this direction last year when I played the 10th sonata, which is the last sonata, and what I used were pictures painted by a friend, an artist friend, Chrissy, and you were there. And what I did there is I had Julian, who was your guest at the last live stream, and I had him with me on the stage to change through the different frames, different pictures, different colors, exactly with me. So what we essentially made chamber music at that moment, which was very interesting for me, and so in this case, in this sense, I want to maybe be more free to think about how you can incorporate that. So it's obviously it's a very vague idea, but to have a visual stimulus is very, very useful, especially if the music in itself is very complicated and very hard to follow. And to have something to follow along is always helpful.
Do you think that was I mean, this might be a silly question, but do you think part of the driving force was so that he could get the audience maybe to warm to his music a bit more, or to understand it better, in his opinion? Because I've heard that he did have some issues with people not appreciating his music. I don't know to the extent, because I don't know a lot about Scriabin. How was he perceived during his time by outside of his contemporaries? Let's say just by the masses, because people like Tchaikovsky were very much respected, and or even Rachmaninoff, even though he had to leave Russia, were still sort of universally loved, even if Rachmaninoff had the bad review here and there. I'm just wondering, was Scriabin seen as like a popular composer or more of an obscure figure by people?
I think that the masses didn't play a huge role in this sense, but when at his lifetime he had a following, maybe you could say, of people that highly regarded him and were very much fascinated by his music and his ideas. And soon after his death, the Soviet Union had in general a very, very restricted and skeptical view to any kind of modernism.
Okay.
So in this sense, it was absolutely, they said basically that he went mad, because they still wanted to appreciate his earlier compositions, and then the consensus was that he went mad. So don't regard the later pieces, but.
And how long did that consensus hold in the Soviet Union?
I would say maybe until the 50s, 60s, yeah.
Until Stalin was sort of out of the picture, maybe. It seems like that always. That's sort of like after Stalin's death, it slowly, that sort of stuff sort of started to change in Russia.
But he was highly regarded by his peers, I would say. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I read that it was Rachmaninoff was fairly devastated by his death.
Yeah. He spent one whole year only touring and only playing his compositions, and there are some very great recordings of his compositions by Rachmaninoff. Actually, much better.
I wish I could play those, but I'm sure some jerk has copyrighted them, even though they're not under copyright protection. I'll have to listen to those, because that's he would have known Scriabin, and so obviously that those interpretations mean a lot more.
There are also recordings by Scriabin himself, but they're not real recordings. They're only by piano roll.
Yeah, that there's Weltyminion or just normal, because
Weltyminion, yes.
Okay, so there's a little bit dynamics in there.
There's dynamics, but you can pretty much be sure that's not the way it sounded, especially because Scriabin needs very generous but very differentiated and highly sophisticated use of the pedal, which those were not able to catch in this way.
Okay, so all three pedals
makes it very difficult. But we can still see, for example, that he was very, very flexible in his tempo choices, so they would never stick to one tempo. It was very, very extravagant in this sense. Yes.
Now, I don't know if this is the case with all piano pianos with piano rolls, but before, unfortunately, some people who know my channel know that the sort of the house of my parents unfortunately burned down, but they had a piano with lots of like classic old rolls, some like Busoni and even like Joplin, and unfortunately nothing by Rachmaninoff, but they had some rolls by Gershwin that were interesting. Unfortunately, they're all lost, but nothing that was like sort of individual. There are records elsewhere in the world, but still very sad. But that was the one thing about the sort of the roll system, the Welty Minion system, is that if I recall correctly, there is no pedal information. There's like a line written on the roll that shows you when to use, so you'd have to sit there and sort of do the pedals yourself, I think is the case. It could have just been that it didn't work on our, but I don't think all of the systems. Maybe some systems had the pedal would work, but ours didn't. So
I see.
And it had but it did have like dynamics that would go back and forth.
But
and tempo changing and
a very, very crude representation of dynamics because there is much more.
There's so much lost,
than to just make it. I don't know how the technical aspect of doing that, probably lifting the hammer more and less to make the dynamic change.
Yeah, it works with air, but I don't. It's like a reverse harmonica. It sucks the air through.
Oh, really?
So there's a line of holes, and the roll goes over it, and it has holes so it sucks the whole time. So it's like a vacuum, and that somehow through like pneumatic tubes and stuff somehow operates but it's a very, very complicated system. And I remember the piano that we had as a family was it had a belt on the bottom. It was like turn of the century technology below.
Yes.
And the belt would constantly fall off. So sometimes I have to go to the piano, put the belt back on, and then but they're very interesting things, and still interesting also. A lot of things about tempo. There's a lot of interesting recordings where you can sort of see like the intensity and speed that some of those people had back then.
Yes, that's like I heard a recording where an orchestra played the Rhapsody in Blue together with this piano roll.
Right, and there's a change because it had to be on 2 piano rolls, Rhapsody in Blue. It was too long for one roll, so he improvised some ending. My father told me this. He improvised some ending to the first roll, and then so he could pick up on the second. So it would be like its own thing. So you could play that to the end and leave it, or take it or leave it.
But it's very fast, nonetheless. Maybe it's so fast with the old recording. It's always the suspicion that maybe they played it so fast so that it could fit on the roll or on the disc.
But this was But this was what I'm glad we got to this point, because it was a question I wanted to ask, because I actually think that probably with the right like financier behind him, it probably might have been possible at his time, considering the sort of technology that existed for making like piano rolls and recordings and stuff. There was ways of even if you look at like old footage of sort of like main streets in Europe and in the USA, where you have like light bulb advertisements where the light bulbs go in different patterns. So I think there might have been a way of sort of like rudimentarily doing it back then.
There might have, but I think so that it was not his main concern to have this realized in this sense, but it was much more of an idea, and I think it's also a kind of a key to understand the newly developed harmony that he had there, that he used there. So it's kind of also very useful for analyzation of the score in a sense.
We have a question from somebody who's been sitting here for a while. I'll show it. Has Scriabin composed any string quartets, string trios, piano trios, or other chamber pieces?
No, nothing. So really strict. Only piano, 1 piano concerto and 4 symphonies, and then one romance for voice or maybe horn. So it exists in both. So it's really no chamber music, nothing of the sort. Yeah.
And when did the color thing start with the Poème de Feuille, or did it begin beforehand his interest in colors. Because let me bring up the other color wheel I have here. Or did it start with the Prometheus piece?
So at that time it was kind of set in stone, so it had to be starting earlier than that. That's for sure.
Okay.
And what I think it's what my main focus on this is that the color, like if C is red or F sharp is blue or this almost black here, I think that's mainly secondary.
Okay.
It's mainly secondary. The most important thing is to say each tonality has a color. And by saying that, you mean that any music that uses this tonality at this moment is inherently related to any other music that uses this tonality right now.
Okay.
So that's the old concept of key characteristics that was already in use in the Baroque era, where it was very obvious that you would choose different keys for different affects. So there was this thing called Affektenlehre. So I don't know how you would, what's the English term?
Theory of how it affects you.
Yeah. No, okay. I get it. No, but so it's a main component of musical thinking in the Baroque era, that any piece has one special affect, one special thought that it wants to illustrate and represent most clearly throughout. So that's why in Baroque pieces there's not so much contrast than maybe in classical music, where the contrast and the dialectical aspect of things got much more important. But in the Baroque era, we had this very, very intense focus on one special color of human experience, you could even say, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if you look at the preludes from the Well-Tempered Clavier, they're usually based within one measure. Bach has pretty much presented everything he needs for the entire prelude. If you think about it, sort of, if you think about basically everything is there, because then it just modulates and he just does different things with the motif that then sort of change it into just in 1,000 different ways. He sort of works, let's say, motif, even though I don't think that was really a term that Bach would have been acquainted with, but or more like rhetorically speaking, just how many different ways he could change it, reverse it, change interval relationships, but pretty much within one measure, everything that's going to be said is said, if that makes sense. Everything that's useful that could be said is said. And then basically, it's sort of like the beginning, like the thesis to an essay is sort of the first measure.
And I mean, the whole point of writing prelude and fugue in each key, which he also did 2 times, is to firstly make use of the new tuning technology that made it possible, but also to have a characteristic, in a sense, to say this is what this key is best used for, and this is what it means to write a piece in D major. Yeah.
Interesting to go through the Scriabin's color wheel and compare it to Bach's Well-Tempered.
Yeah. I mean, so, but the difference between the two schools of thought is maybe that at the time of the Baroque era, where you wanted to focus on one idea and then illustrate it as best as possible in one prelude or in one fugue. And then you chose that key for a purpose. So it's a reason that also this prelude you played right now was in D major, which is the same key that the Christmas oratory is beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's always a very joyful atmosphere.
And different, too sharp, sunny yellow is what he writes.
Sunny and yellow, yes, exactly. Yeah. So and there, for the key characteristics, there's a lot of very logical reasons how it came into being. Like especially in Bach's time, every key sounded different.
Yeah.
Were tuned, they did in fact sound different. So they had distinct colors, you would say. Yeah. A color meaning a means of differentiation, yeah, of characteristic, and also things like the choice of instrument was very much dependent. So if you wanted to use trumpets, then you could not write in every different colors, because most of them were maybe tuned in D for this kind of music, yeah. And then you had and then there's this thing called music history happening, where every composer knows other compositions before him, and then always has associations. And when he writes in a certain key, then he cannot help but think about keys that have already been written in this certain key.
Okay. Now here's another question.
Add on to each other. Mm-hmm.
Do we know Scriabin had like miraculously some composers don't have perfect pitch, like myself, but did he have perfect pitch? Do we know that, or was that just not that important?
I can't ask him, but I read that he actually didn't have it.
Oh, he didn't have it. Okay.
Yes, I read that he didn't. But nonetheless, a very good hearing, but not in a sense.
So that basically there is enough evidence that he didn't have
real
synesthesia.
He would have been a synesthesia, and he would had also perfect pitch. Yes.
Somebody writes here. There's a posthumously published early Andante and Scherzo for strings by Scriabin.
Okay, so this is something that
you didn't know.
No.
That? Okay. I'll have to look that up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Interesting. So I wanted to ask once again, how do we interpret this sort of color wheel from Scriabin's sense? Is he thinking of this as, because there are like two ways of looking at colors. Is he thinking of this like as from a physics standpoint, or as like a painter with pigments? Does that make sense?
As you can see, so he's more thinking about the physics standpoint, I think, because the way he came about, it's very theoretical. He fixed maybe that C should be red and D should be yellow, for example. Yeah, that was very clear to him, and maybe that the F sharp B region should be blue. And you see in this thinking, the circle of fifths is already very important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, for example, this E flat and B flat, those are metallic colors. I don't know even what that means, you know. So that's a problem if you want to map the colors onto the tones, because obviously both are vibrations, both have frequencies. Mm-hmm. But in the case of the sound, we have the frequencies from 16 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and we have this repeating quality of the octave. Mm-hmm. But the visible spectrum of light is much higher. It starts much higher and ends. I don't have it in my mind, but I know that the infrared, which we cannot see because it's too low, and the ultraviolet, which again is also the upper bound of our seeing capabilities, and those are barely an octave apart, you know.
Okay.
So they're like maybe factor 2 of each other. So in this case, we don't have this. We are not able to perceive this effect that we can in colors, in sound, when we have the twice the frequency, that we perceive some kind of similarity in the octave.
So you're saying that if we compare hertz to the spectrum of colors, that we have a larger amount that we can hear as humans than we can see. So that's what you're saying.
Yes, a larger, or maybe because it starts so low at 16 hertz, which is very low, we have the possibility of doubling.
Right.
Yeah, which we don't have in the visible spectrum.
Invisible. Yeah. Okay.
And so he tried to map this onto the circle of fifths. Mm-hmm. But I think it's more. And he changed it a bit, and he just tried to shoehorn it in.
Okay, because at some point it becomes outside the visible spectrum.
Yes,
it's
maybe
music for snakes.
Because the circle of fifths, we made it into a circle. It's actually also not a circle. maybe, yeah.
Okay.
But the color spectrum, the rainbow, is definitely not a circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a spectrum, and the ends don't meet. And so he had to make those ends meet, and he did that by saying kind of metallic, yeah.
Goes into red, yeah.
Those,
Okay.
yeah. But otherwise, we can see that the rate it follows vaguely the light spectrum. Yeah.
Do we know if like the A of turn of the century Russia was our A? Was it 440, or do we just not know?
I don't, because I think that it like I said, it's secondary. Maybe we can go to the other chart, the one that is in the
with the spiral
from yes.
Okay, hold on.
Because then we can see that he wrote there not only the colors that should be visual, but also philosophical concepts.
Okay.
You see, like joy,
joy
for the major, for example. Yeah.
Matter.
What? Yeah.
Like materia or what?
Like materia,
Okay.
like in space. So this was obviously very specific for this piece, also.
Okay.
So, instead
this is just his chart for all. For this specific piece, green or A represents matter to him.
Yes. And so that's his way of having not to print a program and to follow that, because that's not how, because the music is very much following its own logic, but still it has a philosophical program, and you can go along this program by this color. So it's more color coding. It's more an idea of color coding. So the color is just a representation of this key, and then to connect it with this extra musical ideas. Yes.
Okay.
And this brings us very much back to the key characteristics of the Baroque, which is an unbroken tradition. Yeah. And it's only very different that he uses it as a matter to make a narrative during a piece.
Okay.
So he will maybe even start in one and end in a different one. So which is very maybe counterintuitive for it's not the same and as in the earlier epochs, where you would always kind of have a connection from the end to the beginning, like in any prelude and so on.
Unless it's the Baroque where you have the Picardian third, but
exactly. But you can also see
Picardian third, in English.
It's not about major and minor. So it's only C, D, D.
That's what I wanted to ask before. Is I don't see minor anywhere. So when he writes G, is he also referring to E minor, or is it just G is G? Because he's got the key signature written. So
he does, yes. I mean, in the new harmony system that he created for that, he means that there are tonal centers, and G is this tonal center. And
okay, so is he seeing G as G, also G major and G minor then?
In this case, he's seeing G as this new chord, the Prometheus chord, or the mystic chord, or the Scriabin chord, 3 different names for the same chord.
What is that chord? Is that what you sent me?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let me put that on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
So we can discuss that. Okay. Here.
So when we had in the more traditional harmonic sense, every chord had some kind of direction, which would lead to a cadence. So that's why also how the circle of fifths is arranged, that G is the dominant of C and so on. Yeah. So we have this kind of gravity in the tonal system, which makes the piece.
So we have basically like C7 or the dominant 7 to F. It would go to F major.
That would
And
go
then,
to F.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So it has
or
a
if-
leaning quality going to F, definitely.
Or to D minor if you want to be deceptive, but
Yes, or to F minor. Yeah.
yeah, or whatever.
And
if we want to go further, you can, but it's not notated that way, so it doesn't matter. You could do the omnibus thing of not going to the, but I don't want to get it. I don't.
Yeah.
It'll be too technical. So if we go to G,
and so in
how are these two
classical sense-
related? Is it because they both contain the note C, or how are these two related within that circle? Because obviously one resolves to, let's just say, basically that resolves to F, the first chord, and the second one resolves to G.
Yes, and both of them fixate kind of in themselves the tonality of C major, because in the classical sense, to have a tonal center to perceive the tonality of C major, you would need a little bit of F major and a little bit of G major.
Yes.
You need
subdominant and okay.
Yes.
Oh, so he said that. Okay, so he's taking he's taking the dominance from the
secondary dominance.
Yeah.
Two side functions. He kind of makes a structure that stands on itself, that doesn't necessarily want to go to the next key, which is very steady.
So
it has not really. It is very dissonant, but it doesn't want to resolve.
I mean, you could make it resolve.
You could resolve it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
He constantly does it, but it's not in itself.
It's more stable than, say, just a dominance.
It wants to dissolve in so many different directions. Yeah, you have so many different forces that at the end it's again stable.
Okay.
It's like an arc, that has so many forces going from the different directions, so that it holds up itself.
You could end a piece with that chord.
And he does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could also. You could go anywhere. I mean, it's a very interesting.
You could go anywhere.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
point. And where you want to go is dependent on different things. Yes, on. So there are a lot of possibilities. There are things that he does more often than else. So he wants to go by a tritone. It's a very frequent progression that he uses with this new chord, because if you see enharmonically, it's very closely related to the C. This C chord would be very closely related to the F sharp chord, for example. So there are new avenues that become very.
What's enharmonically related? Sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
Well, the most important aspect of the chord is maybe not the upper two notes, not the E and the D.
Yeah.
But actually the C, F sharp, B flat, and E. Yes, and those are actually. That was romantically already very much known and used, because it's this chord that basically the dominant chord with the diminished fifth.
Yeah.
Which is symmetrical.
Yeah.
It's symmetrically, so it really invites this kind of tritone substitution. So that's in this case, that's why he doesn't use. It's not so much more important the minor major relation, because it's more static. Because I mean, it's in general interesting to think about what minor major even means. Yeah, I mean, why is there such a big difference between those two?
I think I generally avoid as a composer thinking of them. This is sort of my own esoteric way of looking at it. Major and minor is sort of like the thing where most people just say happy, sad, which I think is really reductive and
yes.
I heard once that it's actually more. I mean, this is not like a controversial thing to say. One thing is, you could say, is hard and soft. So major is hard and minor is soft, is one way of looking at it.
I mean, that's the way that we call it in German Dur,
Yeah.
and Moll means
More.
nothing else than dire
Yeah.
and soft. Yeah, yeah.
And soft, or male and female, that sort of a thing. And I think the German way is actually a better way of looking at it than happy and sad, because there are pieces in major that I don't find that I don't find like necessarily happy. I think like, I mean, to take like a really stupid example, the Imperial March from Star Wars, it's in
Yeah.
major,
Is it
isn't
though?
it?
No,
The
no, no.
motif is in major
Well, the motif is in major, but it uses G minor and E flat minor.
as the
Yes, so
accompaniment,
that makes
but
it
the
very.
motif is major. If you
It's
just play the
then
motif is major, and then the supporting is minor, and then
yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have something, you have something in between. That's actually an interesting thing to analyze, because it's neither nor.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't really define it as a major piece, and I wouldn't really define it as a minor piece, even though the chords are minor. It doesn't
Yeah,
come
yeah.
across as either. I think at the end it just comes off as sort of like, you know, bedrohlich is the word in German. I don't.
Menacing.
Threatening. Menacing, threatening. That sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm. So I think, for example, there are many different ways to look at major, and minor, but also very useful is is to think about it maybe in direction of movement, because major is in a sense maybe not sad, maybe not happy, but uplifting, in a sense that it has a tendency to go up, especially because that's why also the dominant chord is always major, because it has the leading tone that wants to go up. So it's something that has a very, and maybe from that there can be derived some positive attitudes, that it wants to go up, so maybe that's more positive. Whereas the minor, and especially the minor third, is something that is more and more of a descending nature. That's why we also have in the melodic minor scale that has the big six and the big sevens in an ascending way, and then the flattened in the descending way.
Well, I think that's more related
is
to
kind
the.
of.
It's more related to the dominant. So if
Yes,
you harmonically. So you could just basically over the scale do dominant, dominant, and tonic, and it works better with the melodic minor.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
If you want to like really reduce melodic minor.
But so and for example, also that in later works, or even already in the Prometheus, I could even show you on the first page, he uses this chord, but he uses already alterations of the
Let me see.
higher degrees.
Let me load it up.
So you have the main theme.
Opus 6. Hold on, I have to find the score again. Mistakenly closed the window. All right, got it open. I'll go to the first page before I open it up.
So maybe just to say, every chord here, the structure we just saw was like the major. You can also see it very much in a jazz harmony sense, actually, to view it as extensions. You know, you have the diminished fifth, and then you have extensions, the sixth and the nine. You have a nine and you have a six. Yeah.
Right.
And in this case, we start in E major, and if you look at the corny, the horns, they have this theme. Okay, maybe it's stupid to look at that because it's transposed. They are in F, and it's not easy to see. But
Right.
at the very turning point of the melody, you have the ninth, which is a B, which gets flattened during the melody, because it's a melodic direction always to have a flat or not or natural nine. Has a melodic direction for.
Well, you see part of it in the trombe here, or the trombones, or
Yeah,
the
they are
structure of
voicing
the chord. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for Scriabin, in this sense, especially, is melody and harmony, they are one. He uses much less passing notes and so on. But since the chord has 6 tones, every note is kind of every melody note is also a harmonic note. But
Interesting. So it's not. It doesn't really have this sort of like What is it? What would you call it? Like second species counterpoint with passing notes, sort of thing.
No, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, what is still very much important is suspensions, I would say, but still, yeah, they are maybe what
in a way that is very jazzy way of looking at the sort of independent chords. It's like the ninth is more stable in jazz than in classical music, where it always needs to resolve in some way. It doesn't always need to be resolved, but that's sort of the consensus that if you have a nice nine chord, it wants to resolve.
Yes. Let's go for a second back to this. We can have it even in the score. The graph with the different keys. Yeah.
Right. So let me zoom out a little.
Just zoom out a little, and so I think what is very much important is that music is action in time and space. Yes. And space is something that goes up and down, obviously. Yeah. So you have this kind of spatial this space where you move in. But time is also very interesting how he wrote about it. Just yesterday I read in his own words that time, the way that humans perceive time, is by having different states of mind. You have, at one point you feel this way, at one point you feel this way, and that's how you perceive the passing of time, at how you feel differently from moment to moment in your life.
Yeah, it's why if you're having a bad day, it seems to last forever, and if you're having a good day, it goes by really fast. Sort of very simply described.
and also these different states of mind, these different aspects of your experience, they are not easily defined by themselves. They are defined in their relation to others. So that brings us back to why he didn't, for example, have perfect pitch, and why it's maybe not so important to know what exact notes, what exact frequency the A was at that time. Because
I have a question. You have perfect pitch, right?
No, I don't. No.
No, you don't as well. Okay, we're all yes. Relative pitchers here.
But what is the most important is not the perfect is not the absolute value, the absolute key, but the modulation, actually from where you go, and where you can and want to go, and how they are related. Yes, and that's what fascinates me so much, thinking about key characteristic, not only thinking about Scriabin, but in general, because once we embrace the idea that certain keys have certain characteristics, that means then that the relations between them should be repeatable.
Okay.
You know, for example, if you say, and there are many theoreticians over the ages that wanted to characterize what each key means. Yeah, and then there are interesting graphs of 6 different people, and they all said different things. So that at the end, every key can mean anything. Yeah,
it's like I would define E flat for me personally is more what's his glint of steel is what he writes. So metallic.
Yeah, but
it's humanity for
humanity. That's very interesting.
Flesh.
For example, but
for me, it's more nature oriented.
That's interesting.
I don't,
because,
even E major too. I mean, obviously they're completely different worlds, but I just find the E area to be more naturalistic.
Yeah.
I find them very warm. Both of them, E flat and E major, have this very E flat major and E major. I find very warm and very, I don't know, just natural. Green maybe, green, and then F is for me more of a sunny key than D, but I'll take D being sunny. But it's very subjective, is I guess what you're saying. There's no objective truth to what, because so many people see different sort of what define each key in a different color.
Yeah, and I mean there's this music historic aspect to it, to it. Yeah, where we know, for example, we have a lot of operatic or oratorio music by Bach and by Mozart and so and so. And also there we see that the choice of key is very much dependent sometimes on the subject matter.
Well, it's like C minor is used incredibly rarely by Mozart, but when he uses it, it's very intense. Put it that way.
Yeah.
In general, there's just a few pieces. I think you could probably count them on like two hands, but still.
I mean, in general, it's in the classical era. Minor pieces are much rarer than in Baroque.
Rarer,
yeah. Mm.
And especially, I think it's like first with Schubert and Beethoven that you get pieces like an A flat minor or E flat minor that didn't appear really until the mid Romantic period.
Yeah.
Maybe just as an interim step within a piece, say in, I don't know, in E flat, that there's a brief...
No, I mean, there are also there are movements by Beethoven in A flat minor. And
the funeral.
The funeral march, yes. yes.
Let's get back to I think we're going a little
I think so. What I was trying to say is that that you can make a game out of it, because if you say that there is a meaning, but you don't yet define it, you can put something in, but you know that there should be a relation to it. You know that keys are related. You know that one key wants to go somewhere and is by definition related to this other key. Yeah, and then you can put some starting point. Yeah, and then see where it brings you. And maybe this in this case was done in the context of this piece. Yeah, but it can be any other piece, and you can think about one piece and think this piece characterizes this key, and then you can go on from there. Yeah. And I think, for example, the E flat, some are more characteristic than others, and E flat, for example, for Bach was the key of God, because I don't know, symbolic of the three flats. Yeah.
Isn't I don't want to misspeak. Is not Elias from Mendelssohn, isn't that in E flat too? Am I mistaken?
I wouldn't dare to. Yeah, I don't know.
I could be. Somebody in the chat, please. It's been a while since I've heard it, but that also, but that would make sense because Mendelssohn studied Bach, and then when he decided to do his own sacred work, that would make sense if he chose A flat. I could be wrong. It could be F for all I know, but I think I have a vague memory that it was also an E flat.
And but then you could think, for example, first it would be interesting how the philosophical mindset would change from someone putting E flat as God and the other one as humanity.
Yeah. Okay. So
a cultural shift also. Yeah.
What? How would you define his philosophical shift? So if we remove music for a second, is there any sort of idea of what his philosophical beliefs were, or his religious beliefs, or a lack of religious beliefs?
No, I mean, this was a very wild time philosophically. It was all in the aftermath of Kant. Kant really opened a big picture, which was already 100 years ago. But just by saying that our perception of the world is in a sense fundamental to how we to what the world can be to us. Yeah. And then Schopenhauer is famous for having said that the world is the will and the representation. But will is something very important. The will to live is something that is metaphysical, that became metaphysical. And so in this moment in history where religious beliefs became less and less important, but these fundamental, ground-shaking new philosophical ideas began inviting people to really question everything. That was very much a part of his inner world, and so he took it to go further. If you say that all you can know is that the world is what you perceive. And what you perceive is actually only what it means to you, what it represents to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually a matter of your own psyche. So you decide or you create what you see, everyone themselves. And with Schopenhauer, obviously, everyone's vision, everyone's representations, everyone's will to live is just an individuation, just a small suburb of a very big universal will to life.
Well, this is a fun anecdote from his aphorism where he writes that a sick king is not going to be as happy as a healthy beggar. Which basically is the sort of what you're getting at is the perception of the individual compared to what their status is or who they are in the world and whatnot. It's a very human way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or did I miss the point?
No. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's...
But the smarter you are, the more melancholic you are, is what he also wrote. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but that's the gist of it. We have a question. Did Scriabin's descriptions change depending on the timbre of the instruments or type of ensemble? E flat on a piano versus a string quartet versus a full orchestra sounds very different to me.
That's interesting, obviously, because I think for Scriabin it doesn't, because he only used these two. Mostly he went from the piano, and also his symphonic works I think he wrote at the piano.
Okay.
Because so in this case I think there was not so much differentiation, but especially with strings quartets we know that they use different pitches, they have to tune and intonate differently when they play with a piano than when they play with each other. So that makes a lot of sense that it would also have different characteristics depending on the instruments groups, the instruments that are performing.
So I have a question once again about the color wheel. I'm gonna remove this, the one with the actual colors, because I think on the, if I'm not mistaken, the color wheel has the Prometheus chord transposed for every key,
yes,
right?
Yes, it does. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I think my question's more based off of that. Let me find it. Here we go. So yeah, so that's the chord you sent me before, on C.
Yeah, we see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that continues with every key. So is it more that his going forward is this sort of like the pinnacle of how he understood each color was this chord on each color? Because obviously what happens here is when you have all of these basically two the secondary dominants of the subdominant and the dominant put into one chord that then has the tonic as its center.
Yeah.
It's almost so divergent in the possibilities of. So let's see. If we're in, let's just go from C to make my life easier. So we could go to F major technically, or G major. So that could take us to what color? So it would take. Oh, that does make sense because it goes one back and one forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, because subdominant is the fifth below and dominant is fifth above.
Yes.
Okay, so then the colors, obviously in this case he's done it sort of like the basically the rainbow.
He just mapped the rainbow onto the circle of
red, orange, yellow.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so that does make sense, because then. But then if he's got, say in the score, he's got like an F and an A flat, and it's not quite this chord, You know what I'm getting at, maybe?
Come again? Which
So
chord
so let's
scheme?
say it's like say like there's a and something on the written on the luce, the instrument that he
Hmm.
developed that we don't really have an example of in existence other than the picture I showed at the beginning of the stream. So say there's like what does it start with? What's the chord? What are the first two notes of the piece?
It's definitely
F sharp A.
yeah, but it's mostly A. The F sharp is more global. There are two voices in there, but
Hmm.
the A is more. So it's everything is held in the chord of E at the beginning of this piece.
Okay. Okay. So
And
so it
F
would be the
sharp
Prometheus chord built off of E.
of A.
It
Yeah,
would
of
be built out of A.
A.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's green. It starts out green. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh. And then it changes, but it stays there for a very long time. So it's that's very characteristic that you can stay in the same
Yeah.
tonality for a very long time.
So that would be
That
how
would be
it's that would green.
used very different inversions.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so the main color we'd be seeing with that F sharp and A would be green still?
Yes.
Okay, so and then the F
And
sharp would be added as a slight hint of blue or whatever. What
yeah,
would we
maybe
have?
there's a
Dark blue.
second light source and that changes in a very that changes only a few times in the whole piece.
So I've seen videos where people actually have like an organ type thing with like pipes and the
Hmm.
pipes make light.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
this
array
an
of different of
because you've referred to it as a light organ to me on a few
yeah
occasions, and even though it's referred to in the score more as a keyboard. So my question is, was he thinking of like an actual like pipes that emitted light, or
no, I think he was thinking about of something
just
that
pure?
is
That's
like completely
not
visuals that
yeah,
is
okay.
more really not of this world, something
So
like that. Yeah,
I wonder if you could pull this off in like almost like a film format now.
I think
If
that
we
would be the most fitting, the
Yeah,
most
if
fitting.
we wanted to realize this.
That's I think that what you should aim for.
Okay. So
To have.
how would you I'm thinking like at the moment like you know those screensavers that fade through colors?
Yeah, yeah,
Or let me think there's a couple of sequences I think like at the beginning of the Disney film from the 40s Fantasia as you say
yeah.
it
I
in
think
English or Fantasia.
actually this the whole Fantasia concept was actually the same idea
Yeah.
originally. They wanted to make music more understandable, more relatable by having some kind of visualization to it, and I think that's very very much in the spirit of this whole idea. Yeah.
And they did. I mean, they did a later Fantasia that for Fantasia that I don't think is as good, but it has a couple of great sequences. I think
Yes.
the
Quite
Rhapsody
I
in
think
Blue is
that's
quite fun.
Quincy Firebird, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
But they include two like not abstract in the sense of like for people who don't know Fantasia, you're just gonna have to bear with us. But there's I think most people are into classical music probably saw that as a child at some point, but. Um, there are abstract ones like I don't know like dancing hippopotamuses or maybe
Yeah.
absurdist
Yes.
things sort of like flying whales for the pines of Rome that sort of a thing, but there's also purely abstract ones. So I think the Stokowski had his orchestration of Toccata and Fugue in D minor, which
Uh-huh.
may or may have not have been written by Bach. There's
Okay, I didn't
a
know that. Yeah.
discussion
Yeah.
about
There's a
whether
discussion. Yeah.
yeah, apparently I don't have enough information on that. Whether I personally
I don't
believe Bach wrote it, but
too
whatever.
much doubt. I don't
Yeah,
have too much doubt.
I don't. um, uh, well, yeah, but it's an orchestration that Stokowski did, who conducted the music for the first Fantasia, and it's like purely abstract imagery.
Oh, really? Yeah. 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 I
It's
have
just
to.
like like colorful. If I remember correctly, like colorful waterfalls going through
Yeah.
clouds and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
stuff, and it's purely abstract. And they even like introduce it as like these are the bizarre images that might go through your mind when sitting in a concert house. Or there's like a part where like a stone is moving down a cave. This sort of bizarre
Yeah. Yeah.
visuals. And I think it would be almost probably work best not as like in a sense, but maybe like an animated movie, if we wanted to real, if we had like endless budget to realize this piece as close a fashion as Scriabin wanted it, what do you think we should do? How
I
should we
think
go about it?
the way of having these abstract animations would be very, very fitting, but then you have to have a very to have a good visual artist doing that.
Yeah.
And that is but very much infused by the spirit of the music, and you have to have these double talents. That's the main problem, maybe also of the Gesamtkunstwerk by Richard Wagner, that whenever you combine different areas of art, it's very hard to combine them so that not one has to make compromises for the other.
Right. I mean, there are rare movements in film history where that all sort of seems to come together, and a lot of the times it seems to have to do with like a dictatorial director or something.
Yes.
In movies, if you read about how Hitchcock treated some of the actresses, or even Kubrick treated actresses, especially Shelley Duvall. But we're getting way off topic. But I think. I think like one of the biggest successes probably Lord of the Rings, where all of these different things came together to make this just one-off. Because the Hobbit movies weren't as much of a success, but I understand what you mean. It's very hard when you get a bunch of people together to get like that high of a quality as a Scriabin. You'd need, is what you're saying, you'd need that sort of quality of artist doing the visuals.
It's not always only about bring different artists together, but actually in the nature of bringing different art forms together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even, especially, for example, Schubert's songs. Yeah, they are like such great masterpieces. But for example, some of the poets were not entirely happy.
Oh, about
because they thought that maybe their poem is not perfect. It's more of a music piece, because then now they thought that it lost maybe its main features as a poem and gained this musical, and we probably are of the opinion that it gained in total it gained a lot, but then they would not, it's not the same mind that it came from, so it cannot be completely in sync. Yeah.
No, never.
It's that's kind of the abstract nature of art itself. Yeah. That in the moment when you have two different perspectives, then they kind of make it concrete again.
Mm-hmm. And if but we have the luck that I mean, not the luck, or maybe not, but if somebody wanted to achieve sort of something that was along the lines of, say, his Parisian score, which we mentioned at the beginning, there are two versions apparently of his Luce score, light keyboard score. One that's just sort of the notes and a few like dynamics. Now, with the dynamics, does he have like crescendi or decrescendi for what kind of dynamics is he using for the light score?
In the original, none. It's only the light. But in the annotated version, where he had his freedom, then it was more like you said, sparks, fireworks.
But would he have like fading in and fading out?
Fading out, having like the sun, like bright as that it hurts your eye, and very mysterious surrounding of the whole, very concentrated on one dot, maybe like bolts of lightning bolts, and all the different things that you could actually imagine. Yeah.
Here's somebody, Kant, Immanuel Kant. I guess somebody. I'm behind with the comments here. How are these colors actually knowable? ? Descriptors like pure violet or grass green.
Definitely.
The green or violet is a thing in itself, thus relegated to the noumenon world. Yes?
Yes. I'm completely in agreement. Especially also, we have to think about this. Those are translated color terms from the Russian. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So again, it makes it not easier. So for me, that's why I'm saying, like, for me those colors are more like color coding. You know, when you organize some material, you just put some different colors to different things that you know which belongs to which. And that's the main purpose of this, that to say those have the same color, be it red, be it flesh or what else. It's the most important thing is they are the same in a very fundamental way. They are the same, and that's they explain each other also. Like why does Bach write a prelude and fugue? Because the prelude explains the same tonality than the fugue. They are they deal with the same, even though they can be quite different, but still they are the same in a sense. That's for me like what is most important to me. It's not the colors themselves, but the role of colors as explanatory agents. To the music.
So it's a secondary.
And what exactly the color is for me not, first of all, because we know that it's very theoretically constructed. Second of all, like the comment said, we don't know exactly what color this should be, and has not real neurological, phenomenological basis. It's just a kind of a color coding system, and the more intriguing idea is that it invites you for every passage to go and look for another in the same key and try to fit them together in your head, and then you can be inspired by one for the other and the other way around. And that's what I take from that mainly. And that's why it's already also interesting to have those 48 preludes in all keys too. So it's like a dictionary, you know. And then in the later works, even if it's kind of atonal, still, you know, through this chord structure, you can pretty well establish what tonality we are in right now, because that's where the orthography is so important, you know, because many notes here in these chords they have actually very similar notes, but the orthography is different. And through the orthography we can see, okay, this is definitely like in C, for example, and then I know I have now an intuition of what I can imagine with that, because I can think about what he wrote, about the programmatic aspects, but I can just go and look at any other music that uses C in this case, and for example, other composers that made a huge development in the time, like Schoenberg, who also went his way into atonality and modernity, he had a huge cut. Like when he used his new compositional technique, he didn't appreciate it in his earlier works anymore. He said he wanted to distance himself kind of from that. But with Scriabin, that was not the case. He still, when he was playing as a pianist before he died, he still played his earliest pieces. So it's all one cosmos. It's not contradictory in a sense, and it's also usable to explain. So you can really understand the later works through the earlier work.
Interesting.
I think so. It's much more integrated, everything into each other. It's just, it gets more complicated because
it's like software, Scriabin software updates. And this is our sort of like base code to. Okay. Interesting. Now I'm just analyzing the chord. I mean, I'm a composer. I should have at this point in my life heard of this chord. I think I've heard of it at some time in the past.
It has found its way into many theory books on harmony, actually, as a thing.
As I said, I think chord, I think I'd heard of it at some point in the past, but just didn't. Maybe it just wasn't explained to me in an interesting that made it interesting. Like the little thing you sent me was probably all I needed to see to understand it, because I immediately saw there were two dominants and that they were smashed together, and I was immediately intrigued.
That's a kind of my maybe simplification of it. Is
that your
not canonic? Yeah, kind of. So there are different ways of thinking about it, because we see how he came bit by bit to this chord, and in this case he comes from Chopin. Chopin also used it by different suspensions to the chord, yeah, and alterations. You kind of get that chord already. If you have just the flattened five is very common actually in any dominant, yeah, but it makes the dominant more as a secondary dominant already, yeah. There's a flattened five, and then you can have the suspensions to the fifths and the suspensions to the octave, and then you already have this chord basically. So that in this case it's not so, but I like to think about it in this way that I present.
No, it makes a lot of sense, because I instantly wanted to either go to F or G, and then and those are the colors surrounding each. So if you for the people joining later in the stream, I'll show it again. No, it's not. Forget it. But the interesting thing is that it can go either direction. So if you play it starting on the Prometheus chord based around A, it'll want to gravitate towards either D or E. Or there are what I noticed just by playing it before I look deeper at this chart I have here, is that I also wanted to go to E minor, and that's when I said, oh, it could go anywhere. But I'm looking at it. I mean, that's just the what is it in English? I always confuse it. It's not parallel, because in German it's the reverse of English. Parallel and anyway, so it could be either G or E minor. It's the related minor to G. So in the sense, it's still resolving to sort of the same center. Yeah. Even though you said it's not E minor and G, it's not quite what he means by the colors here. Because in this color sense, it's basically written atonal. There are no key signatures anymore.
No. Here they use only the chord to signify.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And normally we speak of a tonal center even. Yeah.
Okay.
But for me, this what you said, that how it's very, we don't have a good terminology actually for that very important relation. We have from A major, if we think about A major, we have an important relationship from A major to F sharp minor, which is the relative minor, I think it's called. And then we have A major to A minor, which is the parallel minor.
And this is why, because it's different in English and German, it's the exact opposite.
So how
which
is it
means forever I can't remember. I just can't. It's just because they're flipped and I learned in both languages the terms. Okay. And now I can never remember which is which. What you said is probably correct. What is it in German?
In German we don't have it. So we have the parallel E, and the parallel in this case would be F sharp to A minor. A major sharp minor. So that's different. But I think that English is better because we have the relative minor and we have the parallel minor, which is best, because relative means that A major and F sharp minor they are related.
Related, yeah.
Meaning that a piece in A major is very very likely to venture into F sharp minor and the other way around.
And parallel, they're starting on the same key.
A piece in A major is getting weird if it gets into A minor.
Yeah.
Like
with
Bach, you will never find a single piece in A major that has an A minor chord in it.
Right. That's because it's not really related. That comes later.
Not related. Just like
it comes later with like Beethoven.
With Beethoven and Schubert, they love doing that. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because it was in their nature to evoke this.
Well, it's also the tuning.
Absurd.
The tuning of Bach's period was, for the most part, he was brought up in an era and learned how to compose basically in an era pre-equal temperament. And he used a lot of even when he composes his preludes and his fugues and other key signatures, he still sort of follows the rules of if he were writing, say, in G or C.
Yeah, definitely.
He writes in whatever, C sharp or A flat, as if he were writing in one of those keys where he doesn't really go that far away from A flat. So it's just basically this sort of 6 related harmonies within. So let's say in G major, be G major, A minor, B minor, the C
So it's
major, D
the,
major, E minor. So that
basically
would be the keys he'd go to.
the related keys in
Yeah.
which we find the key best. So, for example, the preludes in the well-tempered clavier, they are mostly quite small. But if you go to bigger preludes, for example, preludes to the English suites, or to the
Yeah.
A minor, yeah,
Yeah.
there you have the many pages long, and there you will find a cadence on every related key in the whole
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he will go to every station. Like if you take the A minor scale and build a chord on every note of the scale, except of the on the diminished, the note that would yield a diminished chord. Then those are the stations that this prelude will go to elaborate what it means. Because, like I said, also the color itself, the key itself is meaningless. It only gets its meaning by its relationship, by its surrounding. That's this relative importance of the key, that it defines itself by not by its own inherent characteristic, in inherent sounds, but actually by its relatives. Like a person is also definable by his parents and his grandparents and so on. So
Right. Okay.
how they get generated. Yeah.
It's a very. Would you say that this is a concept that people struggle with when they get into Scriabin? Because it's very abstract and very. I think we used before we were sort of planning this live stream. The word esoteric comes to mind almost.
Yeah. So I think obviously esoteric is it's very esoteric. Yeah. But for me, that is just it's to be. I think that esoteric is a very important aspect in music. I mean, what is the other how else do you want music to be exoteric?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, this is generally the thing I say is that it's like if you read what philosophers write about music or musicians or generally when they write about music, if you're a musician yourself, you're always like, nah, not quite. I mean, it might be a good soundbite, but you didn't boil it down into, because I think philosophers want to do like the E equals MC square sentence that defines something, and they never seem to be able to do that with music, because I think music is inherently very, very hard to describe with language.
That's for sure.
And it might be if we sort of analyze music, what is music? It might be a form of language. Using our other form of language to describe another language we've developed over tens of thousands of years, they compete with each other because they serve different linguistic, let's say, purposes.
Yes.
To this basically.
That's so interesting. Also, when I'm reading, he did all the texts, that the notebooks by Scriabin. Yeah, he has many pages, but never does he speak a word about music.
Yeah, because it's very hard.
Never. Like for him, it's second nature, and he would never. Yeah? But it's obvious that everything that he writes about philosophically, and it's always those reflections of his lecture of Schopenhauer and Fichte and all those 18th and 19th century philosophers, and he reflects them and tries to build an ideology upon that kind of makes sense to him. And it's obvious that his music tries to do, it's kind of parallel. Yeah, he does the same thing in writing than in music, and much more successful in music than in writing. So it is, he works. He tries to climb some kind of mountain different ways, and tries to think about it and get into the right mindset. But it's never it never writes about music itself. That's for me it would be very interesting, and I'm but that's not happening. That's not how it goes. Yeah, that's not how that wouldn't work. Yeah.
Do we have evidence that Scriabin, because I know it's fairly popular with like the Viennese Bach or German composers and just composers in general, was that they were fairly adept improvisers. Do we have any evidence that Scriabin improvised, or was it more of like a formal
I think that he did improvise, but I also read in a book that he talked to someone about the dangers of improvisation, and I
Okay.
think that the music, his late music, especially the sonatas, they speak very much of a not improvised music because it is set in a improvisation is always also maybe limiting yourself to something that you can come up with on the spot, and he wants per definition something that is transformative, that is a work
Right.
of conception, and I think maybe it's very intriguing. I only read that Boris Pasternak is a very famous Russian author and poet, and he was a friend, or he met Scriabin and he wrote about it because he was a big fanboy. For example, he was a big fan of Scriabin, and once he went to him and he was very impressed by the conversation they had. And just in a side note, he said that he talked to him about the dangers of improvisation, which is, I think, interesting. Like the dangers of improvisation for a composer who maybe, especially if he's good at improvisation, can also get lazy maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like the direct opposite of something like a composer like Beethoven, where I know there's a book that Czerny wrote about improvisation, or Fantasia, and something about the correct way to fantasize or to improvise on the piano. And he writes in it basically that Beethoven's improvisations were way better than his compositions, which I think is an interesting... I know you actually, many years back, we knew a lot about Czerny, which I found. Maybe we'll do a live stream about Czerny in the future. That might be interesting.
I'll also do that, yeah.
But
no, I think maybe,
but it seems like a very it's sort of and it also seems to be something that sort of started to disappear. And so let's see, like the classical or serious music realm in the 20th century is that improvisation, probably because it's very hard to, if you're doing like dodecaphonic music, it's probably you probably need a very different kind of. I'd almost say I'm nothing against it, but almost like a mathematical mind more than sort of like
a chess
artistic.
Player, maybe.
Yeah, more like a like a Czech a chess grandmaster for you probably have to be to do on the spot. I mean, if Bach could improvise fugues, I'm sure it's possible. I just don't think it's something many people have tried to do. And it's not a thing I think a general audience could judge if they're doing well. Because I think
I think it can be judged actually, because in fugues you can see that it's
fugues, but maybe not dodecaphonic improvisations.
Maybe I would maybe dare to.
So I think we've been talking a lot. I think maybe we should the few musical examples you've given me from yourself. Is there one you think would exemplify something that you want to wish to talk about?
The two preludes in G flat major, and then the one in E flat minor behind that. They're both from Opus 16, and so there we have two keys that are related. Yeah.
Okay, so G flat major and E flat minor. So number 3, number 4.
Yeah.
And these are like 2-minute pieces. So we'll just take a listen, or should I can pull up the sheet music too for the people.
Why not? Let's do that.
Yeah. Let me open up the sheet music here.
And so I think those are pieces that I've been playing a long time, like maybe over 15 years already. But I think they show some very accessible Scriabin, where also you would say that the Russian melody is not far away in this case.
Okay.
Yeah, they have this kind of cantabile.
Now let me make sure I so this will be you playing, so YouTube copyright can't whack us. Let's see. Okay, so let's start with number 3. I'll play. go right to the next one? So we can have a comparative listening experience. Very nice. I will say the second one did evoke a lot more Russian aesthetics to me, especially ending like that on E flat minor for just some, instead of doing like a 1-5-1, it's just 1-1.
Yeah.
Sort of reminds me of the sort of melancholic folk stuff from Russia. So if we were to go over these and sort of talk about colors again, as we sort of slowly wrap up the stream.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How would we bring the colors into this? Which is, I think, what year would have this been written?
In the late 1890s.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, it's again about the affect. So I go back and I think G flat major, and this is the creativity. It's just like the free mind think is completely inhibited. Yeah.
So this is a bright blue piece, let's say.
This would be a violet, dark,
or bright blue or violet.
Yeah, bright blue or violet. But so for me, it's more this idea of creativity, the idea of the creative mind going where it wants,
meandering a bit,
meandering, and it's very much there in the music and in the character of the music. And then it's interesting how that correlates with the relative minor, which is then the E flat minor. Yeah.
Right.
Which again we have we are now in the minor key. So when we go to the original chart, we don't have any idea about minor. Yeah. But we have idea about E flat major, which is kind of this humanity, or even earlier gods, or something like, which means connection. Yeah, to be part of a whole, of some higher order. That's maybe
the tangible,
abstracted. Yeah, the E major. Yeah. Yes, flesh, to be of the same flesh, to be connected, and then maybe this goes back to the being very lonely, actually, to the opposite. What goes parallel? We need to find something that is related to creativity, but disconnected to order, something like that.
This is very interesting, actually. The structure, if I just will, as my surface level compositional eye is noticing that we have a nice sort of like almost symmetrical aspect to this piece, where it's sort of framed within the first measures by this sort of lonely motif or theme, which is in of itself kind of just this one measure.
Yes.
Sort of adapted in the second measure through motivic modulation, and then towards the end, the same thing again. And then in the middle, that voice gets, let's say, sequenced, and also it's not alone anymore. It has company, to put it simply, with the extra voices. And then at the end, it's alone again. It's interesting.
Yes.
And if it's this very simple piece, but I think actually quite powerful. Also played very nicely, so that helps.
Maybe I have also I sent you another piece, another prelude in E flat minor, which is the same. It also ends on the same chords, kind of, also in E flat. But it's so we see that it's not all they don't have to be very similar, but they can still think about the same. It's still this disconnect, this maybe chaos, because I'm still thinking about
E flat major or E flat minor again.
E flat minor again. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Opus 11, number 14.
Yes.
Oh, this is the one that This is the one that reminded me of the Chopin Etude.
The waves.
Yeah, I think some people might realize some people might hear it, maybe not. Let me get the sheet music here. Here we go. And just go to the E flat Opus 11, 14. Okay. Whoops. If I don't stop it, it repeats if I don't. Okay, so I just wanted to say it sort of reminds me of I don't know if people know the Chopin Etude. But this isn't 15/8 time. I mean, just a little bit of the beginning, and then there's another there's a Lieder ohne Wörter, songs without words from Mendelssohn. That actually reminds me of. There's one, I can't remember which one at the moment, but it doesn't matter. Everything's a little bit related in classic. That's kind of this is kind of a feudal thing. Oh, did they copy this or they copy?
No. No, they live in the same world.
Yeah, they live in the same world, and there are similar rhythms. Yeah. I think that's sort of an issue today. This is sort of the rampant individualism that people have to. If it sounds even a little bit like something else, then you stole this, or. But it's a really. Can you really say that about Mahler's Third Symphony and Brahms's First Symphony? Boom, boom. It's just he just made it minor, so he stole it. But I don't think that's it's a very. It's a futile argument. It's just silly, I think, to make. But it's just fun sometimes to see maybe there is some sort of influence there that came from Chopin. Probably more from Chopin than Mendelssohn.
More like thinking about the etymology of certain words,
Yeah.
History of certain ideas. Where did they come from? Yeah, what development? Who thought of it? Who used it in what context? And how did it change? And that makes it more interesting, actually. And
that's also something I
actively avoid. Yeah. Maybe actually hindering musical progress, in a way.
And I've discovered that when I like research a form I haven't previously done a lot of research on, that suddenly opens up all of these pieces that I used to just hear as a piece, that now I know, it's actually it's one of these, it's based off of like a folk dance or a folk tradition that I didn't know beforehand. So it could be a lot of these things just come from sort of like societal memes, if that
Yes,
makes sense.
memes,
Yeah, the memes of the 18th, 19th century. So this once again, it's based off of E flat. So we're going to, what is it? Steely Blue, or
Steely
no,
Blue
it's
and
Steely, no, it's
or
Steely
Flash, maybe Flash.
Glint
yeah.
of Steel, yeah, Flesh.
With a glint of steel. Yeah, maybe steel in the flesh. Maybe that's the best.
It's an interesting,
the uncomfortable way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
To be pale. No.
But it's
So,
very. I think it's a very
obviously,
interesting
obviously
thing.
this is very, yeah. Obviously, you
No,
cannot
go ahead.
put that because it's 30 years before. There were 20 years between this idea. So at the moment where he wrote that, he didn't have any idea of the sound. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But as
Okay.
I said, so, and for me, that is backwards. The backwards compatibility. Maybe for me, it's more about this. Okay, humanity, not humanity. Yeah, something like creativity. I think this is very chaotic music. It's like it stares into the abyss, kind of, and wants to, yeah, in
Right.
this very unsettling atmosphere. Yeah, which is E flat minor. Yeah, and for example, it's a very special key. I mean, he used it a lot, but also in Bach, I know only 2 instances where Bach uses it. Yeah,
Well, yeah, it's very
like obviously the 2 preludes and fugues. Yeah, which are very, very important pieces, both of them. Yeah, but then for example, in the Saint Matthew, Passion. Yeah. We have the Eli Eli lama, the moment where Jesus says, "Yeah, God, have you forsaken me?" Yes.
Yeah.
And he sings it in Hebrew, and then the orator, the narrator, he repeats it in German, and when Jesus sings it in Hebrew, he sings it in B flat minor, which is, I think, a good way to signify hopelessness. Yeah.
It's a good one for hopeless. All right. Yeah.
And when the narrator repeats it in German, so that we all understand it, the meaning that
it's in
E flat minor.
Okay.
And it's the same. Yeah, and he says, and that's like pure. That's the low point of the whole moment. Yeah, where really we think that things have turned.
Yeah, I've always found E flat fascinating. As E flat minor is a very intriguing key signature. Just enigmatic, mysterious. I don't want to use like overused words. I had a few days over ancient sounding almost.
Ancient. There's a fantastic prelude by Shostakovich. Shostakovich also wrote not only
I have those here, but I don't obviously I can't. There's no, because it's still on copyright. I don't have the sheet music I can show on screen. But
this prelude, for example, not the prelude and fugue. He wrote prelude and fugues in every key, but he But he also wrote only preludes, like Chopin.
Okay.
And for example, this is also devastating prelude in E flat minor by Shostakovich. Yes, and also there's the famous E flat minor etude by Rachmaninoff.
Yeah.
And Scriabin's most famous piece is probably the etude in D sharp minor.
Right, D sharp minor. That's a theoretic. I used that in my piano sonata, the last movement, very, very shortly.
Yeah.
It goes from E minor, sort of E minor, E Dorian sort of motif. Then it goes to E flat, but I wrote it as D sharp because that's more of how I understood its relationship to E. E Dorian in that.
Yes.
But made more sense to me to use it as the D sharp going into E as opposed to just E flat.
It's kind of D sharp is connected to B major, and which is more close to E. Yeah.
Made more sense to me.
Why do they sometimes use E flat minor and D sharp minor? I think it's mostly about, so for example, in the etude in D sharp minor, he has a middle section in F sharp minor. So
Yeah.
obviously, if he wants to modulate in that direction, he will use D sharp minor, because you wouldn't want to modulate to G flat minor.
No, no.
Yeah, with 9 Bs, that would not be so nice. And
Yeah.
in the other piece where you go more in the dominant direction, yeah, into B major, then you write it in E flat minor. It's mostly about where you want to go, and then you will decide at this tipping point of the circle of fifths. Then you have you will choose
Right.
the key where it makes it most easiest to read. Yeah.
So is there anything else you think is important to mention about basically how is there anything we should do nowadays to sort of understand Scriabin better, other than play his music more often? Do you think it should be performed with
I think it actually
with more lights, or do you think that it should be
So,
somebody
in general-
who tries to animate something, or
in general, it is not underperformed, Scriabin's music.
okay,
It's especially the piano music is a very important and highly played part of the piano repertoire. And but to think about how it can be the synesthetic ideas can be realized is definitely something I will try to follow up in my future work. And it's also something that I will need to find, because I don't have the visual competences. You need visual competency.
the artistic
Yeah,
eye,
you need to. I'm not an animator, you know.
yeah.
Maybe I will have to use AI. Maybe it can be.
Maybe AI will solve it for us someday.
Maybe it can solve something, but
because they're starting to make like weird movies with AI that are very strange.
What I saw was very weird, so weird that I thought, oh, maybe that would be useful. It's weird enough that it might.
It's almost like what Philip K. Dick, the android's dream of electric sheep. It's like the computer is like dreaming slowly. That's what it seems like. Watch. It's because it's like sort of like the cognitive stuff that happens in dreams, where faces change or things are just a little bit off. It's almost like that. It's just like almost like electronic dreaming. We get a glimpse of a lucid dream with a prompt. Yeah, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
No, I think that might be the solution. Let's wrap it up on that. But maybe AI will finally give us the Scriabin performance.
I don't
Scriabin might have wanted.
Maybe it can, because maybe it has the possibility to react to the sound, because it needs to be one. That's
right. Now, I've noticed that AI isn't good at music yet, but it's good at understanding language and also understanding visuals. I think it can dissect that better, and it might be able to take those inputs and, as you said, react. Because we do have, like, if I play chords on or like something like Melodyne for auto tuning, it'll get like the rough sort of contours of the notes that are being played, even in orchestral parts. It's quite astonishing what software can hear, sort of. Let's put it that way. Or sort of can comprehend. So we already have that capability where, chords and stuff can be taken out of a live performance, and probably something reacts to that. It'd be interesting.
I mean, I think there has to be put some effort in that the AI can reliably read notated music, which is not so good. Yeah. And then you can feed it the whole input, and then you can see what. Yeah.
Maybe a decade or two, and then it'll be.
Maybe then it will be interesting, but still it would be only copy pasting.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good roundup. Maybe that's the direction it needs to go in. Maybe not. Maybe an animator out there should take it upon themselves and try. It's sort of like an unending project, there's is it the John Cage piece that's going on for like 800 years in some church in Germany. I think it's a little bit more profound than that, than notes in slow motion that go for 20 years. But that might be the solution. And I'll just check if there's anybody. No, there's no more questions. So we'll
thanks. a lot
I'd
for
like to thank Yunus for having me, and I hope to have another discussion with him in the future, maybe more about Scriabin. I think you said there's another topic that might be interesting
sure.
about Scriabin, and maybe Czerny. That would also be interesting because I know you know a lot about Czerny too,
And
who
Beethoven,
I know who I don't know as much about as I do about like somebody famous like Beethoven, but Czerny was also very important. So we'll see.
Very.
We'll plan something
Yeah.
and
Sounds good.
I'll have to figure out what the next live stream, but I'm gonna keep it on the last Thursday of every month at the time we started. So everybody's in a different time zone, so I can't. Where we are at 7 p.m., but where you are could be different. It'll always be up a week in advance, so you can see. So thanks for
Thank you very
watching,
much.
everybody. Bye bye.